Welcome in to another episode of the My Two Bits Gators Football Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Ben, joined as always by your other host, Mr. Randy. Randy, how are we feeling? It's a little earlier in the day than normal. We feeling good? Feeling fresh? What's going on?
Feeling good, my man. It's a little bit warm. That's all right. We're getting over a couple of days of rain. We needed the rain, but happy for an early recording. Still see sunshine. Ready to get into it.
All right. Sounds good. So today we will be doing a review of the personnel decisions that this staff has made and what that has looked like in the previous years, as well as what we think it will look like going forward. So officially, we are calling it process, evaluation, and player personnel decisions. So as always, we will start off with our mission, our accuracy disclaimer. I still can't say it right. No matter how much I try, I can't say that right. Our vision, our agenda, and walk through what we're going to talk about today. So our mission, as always, is to provide factual analysis of all things Florida Gator football. Our accuracy disclaimer, hey, I said it right, is that our information will be accurate to the best of our ability. We will cite our sources whenever we use them, and all statistical data either comes from ESPN or stats.ncaa.org, and recruiting data comes from on3.com. Our vision is to have unfiltered conversation around the product on the field, as well as recruiting and overall coaching decisions. Our analysis will be based on review of film, heavily on that today. And while we will express opinion, that opinion should always be based in some form of fact. We will also evaluate strategy and tactics and discuss our observation of player personnel decisions, yes, as well as on-field execution. So to that end, our agenda, very short and sweet tonight, or today, and that is going to be that we will look at the personnel / talent evaluation and playing time during Napier's tenure and how that's been handled so far. And then we will also talk about where does the staff have the potential for getting it wrong next season, where we want to make sure that doesn't happen, right, and discuss some of those positions and where that could come up. So to that end, we will get started, and then from there, we'll, of course, wrap up and sign off. That's it, only 2 dots on this, but we're going to have plenty to talk through here. So to start off here, we want to look at the position groups that we feel were not addressed well in previous seasons, at least to start the year. Maybe it's throughout the year, but for my purposes, it's going to be to start last year, because I think we got a lot of that better as we went along. But certainly we had some issues to start out the year. Randy's going to look at the previous years. He's going to do the 22 and 23 years under Napier and kind of look at where we had some personnel decisions there. So to that end, I will turn it over to you, sir, to get us started. Talk to me about what positions you had issue with. And again, we have not discussed what these are or what we're going to talk about here. So just a little caveat there that I might have some surprises here or be like, oh yeah, I remember that. But yeah, get us started. What are we looking at for 22 and 23 where this staff didn't do such a great job at evaluating who should start?
I was going to say, how much time do we have? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I don't want to start off like that. The interesting thing is, we've had different discussions around, okay, how did so-and-so get on the field? Is this the best we have?
Yep.
Why isn't this other player on the field? And it's tough because you're trusting coaches to make that decision in practice, right, when it comes to spring camp, summer camp, fall camp, the final tune-up before the season starts. But I'll give you 3 key positions for me that I felt like those position groups just were not addressed well in past years. Okay. The first one that I'm going to bring up is going to be Amari Burney. Anyone remember that name?
I do.
In the famous words of Billy Napier at the podium several times, he called him old man. There's a reason for that. A lot of years of eligibility. A lot of years seeing the field. But for whatever reason, never graded out to where he probably should have been given all the snaps and all the experience. Now, those of you might remember Amari's probably his most famous play is the interception against Utah in the swamp several years ago. That did seal the game. So phenomenal read there. So in 4 years, he had one phenomenal read. The thing about Amari,
that's amazing.
I know. Shots fired. The thing about
Indeed.
Amari that was tough was it always seemed like he was an old man. I mean, he was going the wrong direction. Maybe the Alzheimer's had set in. I have zero idea. But at the end of the day, playing out of position, playing with lack of, shall we say, skip-to-itness, Amari always felt like he was a step behind the play. He always felt like if you go back to a basketball translation, weak side help, it was extremely weak because he never came at all. And so he couldn't get there. And when you look at the other people in that room from the linebacking spot, the inside linebacking spot, of course, we had a younger group, right? But you had Shamar there. You had Scooby Williams there. But you had some upperclassmen in DeJuan Black, Derek Wingo. But either way, Amari kept getting opportunity after opportunity, and it seemed like it was almost wasted because when I took a look back at some of the Pro Football Focus rankings, overall grade out, let's just say he barely made it to 70 2 games out of 12. Okay,
Yeah, well,
so
70's good. So 60's average, right? So 70's good. But anything below 60 is below average, right? So that would be, yeah, not great. And not that 70's setting the world on fire, certainly, but it is above average, I guess. Maybe I shouldn't call it good, but it's above average.
all right, B, you want to poke the nest? No problem. Overall average grade 57.2.
Yikes. Yeah, not good.
Okay.
Not good.
And again, folks, that is Pro Football Focus. You want it to be, you got it. So Amari
Yeah.
Burney is one of mine. Just again, great kid, but on the field, again, the optics on the field not good. So there's one.
And again, this is a guy that was a starter. We're not saying he can't see the field with those numbers, right? Like we understand there's got to be depth, and we were short of depth at linebacker when Billy Napier first got here, right? We understand these things, but why in the world was that a guy who not only started but continued to start after putting that stuff on film? That's the problem.
Couldn't have said it better. The next victim, I will say, he probably could have been called old man as well because he was redshirted, but Mr. Trey Dean III.
Ruh-roh.
Yeah. Trey Dean, especially at the safety position, is what we call, dare I say, a liability. Okay?
Yeah, for sure in coverage.
For sure in coverage. Now, I'm glad, Ben, perfect segue. In coverage, I'm just going to read off something here from his senior season, okay? In 12 games, you finish with sub 70 tackles. Okay.
Yeah.
You finish with 4 tackles for loss, half a sack, no problem. But in a safety position, you're hedging the run. You're also dropping back in pass coverage. You have 4 passes defended. Okay. Oh, that's right. The ball was going over your head. You couldn't locate the ball. Trey Dean was another one who had difficulties, in my opinion, with depth perception. And when you look at the way that a safety is supposed to either charge or float to the ball, his positioning, very similar to Amari, I think they were roommates, but very similar to Amari's, was very lackadaisical, very slow. And again, Trey is another one of those players who had a lot of snaps, okay? He started, okay, even as a redshirt. And the things that we saw on film continuously, we saw was out of position. And one of the things, okay, I'll tell you, I'm going to back up here. One of the other things that bothered me the most about Trey, and V, you might remember this, when he finally would make a play or would be involved in a play, who was the first one whose helmet was bobbing up and down and yapping his mouth?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it's like, what are you doing? Just play football. Much less, you stop the offensive player after a 17-yard gain, and you're bobbing your helmet up and down and yapping your mouth. Why don't you prevent the 17-yard gain? Just saying. Other players in that room, Amari Wilson, we know the situation there. Miguel Mitchell, we know the situation there. Trevez Johnson, Rashad Porras, Jadarius Perkins. But at the end of the day, Trey Dean kept getting the start, and Trey Dean kept being a liability for that But there's my number two is Trey Davis. No, but with those two, with their upperclassmen status, with the amount of snaps that they had, I found kind of found a correlation between Walter Matthau and Jack Lemon. So I figured I just call them grumpy old men. So there's that. And then my last one, positionally, I'm going to go to the offensive side of the football. And this was a tough one because I looked at a lot of different positions. And at the end of the day, I think I'm going to boil it down to the running back position. And one of the things that I thought was really tough to see was Naquan Wright get a starting position.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't finish it. So the start of the season, not the starting job. And in that running back room, you had Montrell and you had Trevor, whose last name I still will not mention to this day. But either way, we know that I'll call it M&T, made a very formidable running duo. And Naquan, for whatever reason, Naquan's fast, not quick, he's fast, he's in size, but Naquan never had a vision. Naquan could never follow the blocker. Naquan could never reverse pivot or have that vision to the point where, okay, this hole just got eaten up. I'm going to shift left and I'm going to cut this way. Naquan, for whatever reason, couldn't get into second gear. He was always in first gear, trying to get out of first. Right? And so Naquan it was tough to see him get the start when you're going, hey, look at the talent we have behind here that can get snap, that has experience outside of Trevor, whose last name I will not mention. But even with Montrell, Naquan Wright got the majority of snap. Now, to start the season, I will say that did get corrected later on, but it was just tough to see the way it started the season. So, anyways, those are my three that probably jump off the plate as far as what started our reason for doing this topic regarding these positional groupings and how they were selected and why some of these players were on the field. Sorry, B, that probably went a little bit long, but that's all I got.
No, I think that's great. So I think when you look at this, you're hitting on the key points, right? It's really an interesting thing. So when we look at these things, and I love that you brought PFF into this. I've got a couple of those as well. I don't have them for every position that I'm going to do, but when we look at this, okay, let's say 2022, 2023. The cupboard was a little bare, right? We know this. This is not, a lot of people are accused of being Napier apologists if they talk about the fact that we didn't have the talent on those rosters. Well, guess what? Whether it's an apologist or not, we didn't have the talent on the roster. That doesn't change the fact, right? So whether we're giving Napier too much of a pass for that or not, that we can debate. But what we can't debate is we did not have super talented rosters in those seasons, right? Period. We just didn't. So when we look at that, I don't have a problem with saying, okay, we could have had some better decisions. We missed a few here, we missed a few there. I think the three that you called out are really, really good. When you look at again PFF grades, right? The Trevor, whose last name shall not be mentioned, graded out at an 81.6 in 2023 when he was on our team. He was the top graded player on our roster for the year. And you started Naquan Wright, over him.
Naquan, yep.
And then you had Montrell too, who was also excellent. So, like, what are you doing? Literally, what is the thought process there? So, like, that to me is where I'm going. I like Naquan fine, but like, he's not better than Trevor or Montrell. So what are we talking about? So that's what we'll continue to get into. Now, I think with mine, you have less room to make those excuses because last year's roster was more talented. Not as talented as this year's, but more talented nonetheless, right? So this is why we're having this conversation. We want to make sure that we emphasize the point that talent is great, but you have to utilize it properly. You have to put it on the field when and where it matters, right? So these are things that we want to get into and discuss here. So to that end, I want to give a little shout out here to some of the players that I think were very questionable at the start of last year. So I went back and I looked at this game one depth chart for Miami. Not trying to revisit the Miami game, anybody. We all know how that went. But I think maybe some player personnel decisions didn't help us in that game, right? So let's talk about it. Number one, first and foremost, Khalil Jackson, before he got hurt. He was listed as the or starter. He was actually listed first, but he was listed as the or starter for that game with Elijah Badger. Would you like to know what their PFF grades looked like for 23 and 24, respectively?
Please be.
57 for Khalil Jackson, so another example of not so hot, versus 81.4 in 2024 for Elijah Badger. What are we doing?
Yikes.
What are we doing? And clearly you saw on film when you watched Elijah last year that he was a better receiver than K-Jack. I love K-Jack. He's a great kid. Love the third generation legacy. I love all of it. But at the end of the day, if you're not the most talented guy, you don't start. Maybe you don't even see the field, but you damn sure don't start. And that's where the problems are coming into play. So that's example one from 2024. Even though Elijah did, of course, start, it was only because K-Jack got injured. On the depth chart officially, he was an or. Right? So there's that. Next, my personal favorite. Right tackle, Cam Waits. No. We have talked about this at length about how we don't want to see that happen again this year. It doesn't look like it's going to, which is a good thing. But we started Cam Waits over Crenshaw Dixon. Crenshaw Dixon ended up finishing as a top 10 PFF graded offensive lineman for last season. Top 10. And we started Cam Waits, who couldn't block a wet noodle. I don't know what he was doing out there. He was letting everything by. Absolutely everything. It was ridiculous. So he's a turnstile, and then you have a top 10 PFF offensive tackle. Interesting choice. And by interesting, I mean ridiculous. He did eventually get benched. The staff did get it right as we went further in the season, right? He ended up being a backup and then actually playing pretty sparingly as the season went along, which was the right thing to do because maybe he can play guard. I don't know, but he cannot play tackle. Maybe it's a Damian George situation, right? But he is not going to cut it as an SEC tackle. So that's example two. Example three, this one's a little different. But I went back to that game, and something that caught my eye was Montrell was the starter. Of course, makes sense. We know, even though coming off an injury, he was the starter. Webb was second string. And I don't have any problem with Webb being the second string guy, except he wasn't an or with Baugh or Jackson. Baugh, Jackson, and Katie Daniels were all listed as ors for the third string running back spot. Now, this brings up an interesting thing, right? Because in the case of Jacoby, in the case of Jaden, you have guys who are freshmen, right? I know Jaden was a transfer, but he was new to or not Jaden, sorry, Jacoby was a transfer. But nonetheless, you have guys that are freshmen at least to the program, first year in the program. So I understand why they wouldn't necessarily be starters in that scenario. But look at the production that those two got and continue to get and are going to get this season, I guarantee you, because fortunately I think running back is not the problem this year, but we'll get to that later. But what were you thinking? How are those guys third string? I don't care if they're freshmen. Just because they're freshmen doesn't mean they shouldn't play, doesn't mean they shouldn't start. We started Castell as a freshman because we didn't have another safety, but we started him as a freshman. So clearly this staff is willing to do that. But are they willing to do it when there are more tenured guys in the position? And that's what worries me, because there are several examples here that we could look at, again, when we get to the discussion for this season, where the more tenured guy isn't necessarily who I want to see starting, based on everything we've seen on film that we've watched on these guys and shown what they're capable of. So this is where concerns lie, right? Again, not making an argument for them to be starters. Montrell should have been the starter. Absolutely no argument. But should Treon really have been the only second string, or should those guys have all been ors? I think the answer is the latter, right? And they didn't really see the field in that game until very late when it was over, if at all. It was pretty much just Webb and Johnson for most of the game. So things to consider. Last but not least, and this one is ridiculous. I mean, this might be the absolute most ridiculous one. So we had a transfer last year come in, and he did fairly well. His name was Pup Howard. Y'all might remember him. He got hurt at the end of the year, but he played a pretty good season before that. Very good season, actually. 80.4 PFF grade overall for the year, which is outstanding. And he was listed as an or. So, in other words, they were both starters on the depth chart. When I say listed as an or, what I mean by that is it could be either guy starting. One does not outrank the other. That's what the or means for those that aren't aware on the depth chart there.
Mm-hmm.
He was listed as an or with Derek Wingo.
Wingo. Mm-hmm.
I love Derek. Derek is a class act human. He is a phenomenal dude. Everything I've ever heard him say on camera, well, I guess it's always on camera because it's never been off with me. But regardless, he presents himself exceptionally. He is a class act kid. And listen, he's not untalented, but he is not at the level of Pup Howard. And what proves that out is Derek Wingo's grade for linebacker in 2023, 57.6. So yet again, an 80-something to a 50-something. And we're saying those guys are equal coming into that game by saying that they're either one could be the starter. They're not equal. It's not close. It's very clear who the more talented player was. It was very clear on film from snap one when we saw Pup out there busting heads versus Wingo running around trying to bust heads but not really knowing where to go. That's what it looked like on film. Just keeping it real. Calling a spade, as we like to say, right? And so those are examples that I had from last season where, what are you doing? Because this is just wrong. And we can't continue to have that. So I have a question for you before we move on to the next segment. Yeah. Does this staff have an issue with certain personnel choices within specific position groups? Is there a seniority problem? Is there a talent evaluation problem? Because their talent evaluation for recruiting and the portal and everything else is outstanding. I have less than no issue with it. I think it's one of the best there is in the country, quite frankly. Their talent evaluation is as good as it gets for picking guys that are either rated highly or not rated highly. They have nailed that. But the problem is they don't always play them when they should. So what are we doing here? So do they have an issue? Is there some kind of block? Is there something with, as you mentioned in our discussion leading up to this pod, is there something with good practice players that's coming into play here? Is that part of it? And again, I realize I'm asking for an opinion here, and this isn't necessarily based as much in fact as we normally like it to be, but what are your thoughts on that?
So that's what's tough, right? You've got a couple different things that you can glean from based off of practice. And I mean, we've heard it, right? Is it possible that players are solid or just stellar in practice, but is it a stage fright thing when it comes to being inside the white lines on Saturday?
Yep.
And we've known a lot of players to be like that. We've seen a lot of busts. I mean, let's just be honest. When you look at the talent of some players that we have seen, and in relation to how many draft busts there are in the first round or the top 10 picks, it's an epidemic. It really is. The talent doesn't always say that this is going to lead to this, that, and the other. But at the same time, is that why the coaches have that little thing on the back of their head? Hey, this guy grades out as an 80. 80 PFF. Awesome. Going back to Pup Howard. But guess what? He can't read this play well. We need him to do this really, really well. So therefore, we don't have the confidence to put him in like that. I don't know. That's the hard thing to figure out because
Agreed.
We have no bearing on what that evaluation really looks like. Is it like a vehicle, right? You come in for an 80,000 mile, and you go through a 32-point vehicular inspection. I don't know. That's what's tough.
Yep.
And then you go back to the Mullen days, and is it a seniority thing? We know it's not a seniority thing because that was proven wrong because of the freshmen that have played the next man up mentality. Yep. So that's been great. So outside of that, unless it's just player, stellar at practice and stage fright or whatever else, or clenched, butt cheeks. I don't know.
The cheek check, to quote another football podcast that you may or may not listen to. Good old cheek check. I like that take, and I think you're right. We can't know, right? We're not in the practices. We're not in the staff's heads. we don't know what they're doing or what they're not doing as a part of this evaluation. And maybe there is some thought of, being better practice players. But like, again, the examples that I can bring up here, it becomes very difficult for me to rationalize that when I think about a Naquan Wright starting over a Montrell or a Trevor, right?
Yeah.
Either one. It's illogical. It doesn't make sense. It's not shown to be the better player repeatedly on film immediately, and that stuff screamed on film. You saw it right out the gate. You were like, "Oh wow, this guy can really play. Why isn't he starting?" You immediately had that thought, right? I immediately had that thought about Pup Howard, even though Pup did start, but it didn't take long for me to go, "Hey, that's the right guy here. We need to leave Wingo off the field." Right? We just don't need to play him unless it's just to get him a blow, right? To get him a rest. So
Yeah.
these are the things that just don't make sense that we see, and it becomes so obvious on film immediately. Now again, we only have game film, we don't have practice film. So again, to your point, maybe there's something to the practice player thing. I can't rule that out. But like, what were we doing with Trey Dean and Nickel? You made that great analysis. I mean, that guy blew coverages like it was a part-time job. Like, I don't understand what he was doing most of the time. I'll never forget that play against Tennessee where the receiver just streaks by him and he just stands there and it's his man. Now maybe he was zone or whatever, but he literally stands there and watches the guy go, and then like 5 yards later he's like, "Oh, I better go." Like, what? He ran right by you? It wasn't a coverage confusion thing. You just didn't do what you were supposed to do. Like, how does that stuff not happen in practice if it's happening in games? Like, I mean, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't. But we can't know. But that is the part that's so frustrating. So to answer the question here, I liked your answer about seniority. I agree. This staff doesn't have a problem playing freshmen. Again, I would bring up, if there is a more tenured guy, do they get a little more preference? I don't know. I have felt like maybe that's the case at times, but they'll certainly play freshmen. They are not opposed to doing it, and they better not be coming in next season because we have some very talented ones. But do they have an issue with certain personnel choices within specific position groups was the question. I don't think so. The one thing I will say about this staff that is a positive is that when they do make a mistake there from camp, from the off season, right, from spring and fall practice, and then they go into the season and they get it wrong, they do tend to fix it wherever they can. Now, that didn't happen with Trey Dean, but we didn't really have anybody else to play nickel except Perkins. And Perkins was great when it was man-to-man, but when it was zone, man, he didn't know what the heck he was doing, which Trey Dean didn't sometimes too, but I think Perkins was worse in terms of that. So his coverage overall was better. Sorry, what did you say?
No, if you can imagine him being worse.
Yeah, exactly. But he was kind of worse in zone when you look at the film on that. So, we didn't have a lot of options besides those two. I think those were really the only two that we had, and yeah, it just didn't go our way there. So, to that end, let's move on. Let's talk about where the staff has potential for getting it wrong next season and why we hope and are kind of doing this to say, okay, we'll see what comes out, but this is what we're thinking right now based on what we do know about the different position groups. So first and foremost, QB, running back, majority of the O-line minus one position being right tackle, D-line and linebacker, we think we're pretty good. So we're not going to go through every player at every one of those positions, but I think we're pretty sewn up on who the starters are already, and I think we know that they're probably going to get most of that right. We don't have too much conversation there. So let's start with the other position groups and kind of work through this and see where we go. So first and foremost, safety should be pretty sewn up. We think it's going to be Castell and Thornton. I think that's probably the right call, right? You got Josiah Davis there with a year under his belt. You got the two freshmen in Gonza Hayward and Drake Stubbs, who I like, but I don't think are probably the best to start, right? We saw Castell out there doing his best as a freshman, but he made a lot of freshman mistakes, right? We don't want that despite the talent level. Certainly those guys can come in and fill in and back up as appropriate, and maybe Asa Turner could play again. We'll see. That's another interesting one. We'll see what happens with Asa, because I forgot about Asa. When I went and looked at that Miami depth chart, I was like, oh, the starter was Asa Turner. Of course it was, right? So So that'll be interesting to see if Asa can come back. I know he applied for that medical red shirt. Haven't heard anything back on that yet. So we'll see if he's able to get back for another year and maybe make the starting rotation or at least part of the rotation. I think it would be good if he was in it somewhere. We'll see about a starter. I don't know. Thornton looked pretty good down the stretch there, and so did Castell finally at the end of the year. Certainly didn't look that good at the beginning of the year. So I think pretty good on safety. Any thoughts on safety there you want to discuss?
No, when you look at everything returning, Castell and Thornton, especially Thornton, well, I'm really, really proud of how he finished the season, especially, the main thing I'll refer to is the Ole Miss game. Yes, you can argue that Jackson Dart threw a couple of bad balls, but either way, he was there to catch it, and he was there to pick it, and it was just a phenomenal showing. And I think that was a turning point game for him. Sometimes guys need a career game. Sometimes the guys need a pick-me-up game, and when that happens, it'll elicit some inner confidence that they should have had all along. But I really expect to be turned up this season because of that. Because now it's one of those things where, hey, I did do it. I can do it. It becomes more of a belief ingrained in you, right? So yeah. I expect a lot of great things out of that position. And Castells, going back to what we've talked about with Castells over the years, flashes of brilliance, flashes of what are you doing? And last year we saw him kind of retract in an odd way, but then he tried to pull it back towards the end of the season. So I expect more consistency from him this year, being the senior guy in that position and really leading that group.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. And what's crazy is both he and Thornton are still juniors, so they might even have another year. Just depends on how this year goes, obviously. But it's crazy to me that they've been playing for as long as they have, and they're still only juniors. But regardless, I think that's good. And we'll see what that looks like moving forward. But I think we're pretty solid on Castell and Thornton being the starters there. I think they will be, and I think they should be in all likelihood. Again, barring some kind of weird regression like we saw last year. Hopefully that does not happen, and I think we're pretty much on the same page with them being the starters. All right, moving on. Nickel. I think this is probably still Denson and Gates, or Denson or Gates, perhaps, right? Either one starting and kind of, working it positionally for coverage versus run stopping, right? And things of that nature. Assuming, of course, Gates is healthy. You could also potentially see Josiah Davis here play some nickel. I think he's got the ability to do that as well. And then you could potentially see another corner come in there that, one of the freshmen potentially that are coming in, as looking at this. As well, maybe. We'll see. I don't know. I think, again, it's probably Denson or Gates. I think we're good there. And I like those guys. They were both very good in their own respective ways last year. Again, Denson better against the pass, Gates better against the run. But both did a pretty decent job there. And again, I think that's who you'll see as the starters, probably an or situation on the depth chart, and I'm good with that. Any thoughts there?
No thoughts. I like where you're going. I'm tracking with you. However, I think I'd like to see Josiah more in the nickel spot compared to the safety spot, because I think he can be a really good ball hawk, and not to mention the way that he pivots and the way that I've seen his hips move and his footwork. I think it's more crucial in the nickel position than the safety position, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you. That's obviously covering the slot receiver there, playing the nickel, and I think that's a position where
inside,
hip movement, foot movement, things of that nature. It's really important to be able to do that. I think Sharif does a good job there, but Sharif often doesn't do a great job in run stopping, and I think that's where Josiah could potentially have the best of both worlds there. So it is something to look at. Certainly, if we see him play some there. We would want to evaluate that on film. We've only seen it sparingly and haven't really gotten a lot of tape to look at. It's only been kind of garbage time that we've seen him there. So definitely something we want to evaluate moving forward. But yeah, it's something to look at for sure. But overall, I think even if it is Denson and Gates, which I think it will be, I'm okay with that. So we'll see where it goes. So the next one is where we really start getting into a conversation about we really don't know what the staff's going to do here. So corner, we know Devin Moore is going to start on one side, assuming he can stay healthy. Which, please, Devin, have a healthy season.
Right.
Be a top 10 pick because of it, because you're that good. Straight up, the kid is phenomenal. Looked phenomenal in the spring game. Looked like he was fully back from injury, which is great to see. Love him to death. He just can't stay healthy. And man, I want him to stay healthy because he is a phenomenal corner. He's a lockdown corner when he plays well. So that's one side of the ball. We know he'll be a starter, and that's fine. Now, assuming charges are dropped or reduced against Dijon. And for those that don't know, that very well may happen. As far as I know, charges still haven't been filed, as far as I'm aware, not
Mm-hmm.
formally anyway. He was arrested for things, but I don't think he's been formally charged. So we'll see what happens there with Dijon in this arrest. But who do we think the better candidate is between him and Cormani? Because I think those are likely your competitors based on everything we're seeing, hearing, all that out of spring camp right now. Anyway, I think those are likely your guys. And where do we think the others factor in? Right? Where does Teddy Foster factor in? Where does Jameer Grimsley factor in? Solid recruit there. Where does he factor into things? Where does Ben Hanks perhaps factor in? Right? So these are questions that we have about the corner position. Give me your thoughts. Where you at?
So, this is one thing I was trying to look at. I couldn't find anything regarding the charges and what they look like, and you know, hopefully we can put that to rest sooner than later. Obviously, under Coach Napier, we haven't had a lot of extracurricular activities. This was one, of course. AR, you know, took a vehicle going down Newberry Road here at in excess of 100 miles an hour. That was that, and then you had Mackay Burrow, you know,
Speeding in
they're in
Georgia,
Georgia.
as Georgia
Speed,
does.
right? Right.
Georgia
So
is
be
as
it.
Georgia
Whatever.
does.
I get it. But either way, I agree with you. More, Devin, please stay healthy. Do whatever you have to do. If you have to go borrow the little witch doctor from Pedro Serrano, whatever the case might be, just stay healthy. Because I agree, he is Jason Marshall level esque, and if not more, because of the
I
way
think
he
if
can
not
track the
more.
ball.
And for the record, the Major League reference is phenomenal. Just got to throw that out there. That's outstanding for those that don't know Major League or Major League Two, either one. Outstanding stuff. Love it.
Well, and that's the other thing too, right? Look at Moore when he wears the headband. You look at his hair, his afro's all. It looks like the little witch doctor and a little doll in Pedro's locker. But anyways, that's what I think of. But yeah, he can stay healthy. That'd be phenomenal. Dijon, we'll see. Cormani, obviously, we know the conditioning is there. Boulders for shoulders. Putting on what 20, 25 pounds.
Yeah, something
Cormani
like
can do
that.
some great things. He's very athletic, but can he adapt to this system and play within the system? We did see him get beat really bad at Texas. I know we were depleted, right, at Texas, but he had a bad game at Texas, turned around with another bad game back to back. So that was
Can
what it
we can
was.
we just bring him in every time we want to play press man and take him out every time we don't? Because if we do
I was
that, I
gonna
think
say
that's the perfect personnel decision. Because him and press
press
man,
man.
he's disgusting. But
That
everything
is your
else,
man.
he's sus.
Period. That is your man, right? So hopefully he's rounded out his game as far as in coverage goes, being able to cheat and see where the ball, head on the swivel, all those things. But yeah, press man, that's I mean, if he had one assignment, talk about doing your job, that would be his job. Tell you what, Foster, I expect big. It's funny you commented on Foster and Grimsley and obviously we know Hanks, legacy player, but besides that, had a phenomenal spring game. He can be a ball, but I expect big things out of Teddy Foster this fall. I really think he
Interesting.
could be
Okay.
that one to insert in that quarterback position and make a name for himself. Not saying it's a contract here, but I'm saying Teddy could be that emerging force that we need because knowing how depleted, God forbid something happens to Moore, I mean, we're already depleted at the position, and depending on what happens with Dijon. So I would expect big things out of Teddy this year. Hopefully he sees the opportunity that he has to work really hard and hopefully be integrated into that role depending on what happens with the formidable starters, Moore and Johnson, this start of the season.
So give me your two deep for both sides of the field. Give me your starters, give me your backups. Game one, based on what we know, which again, we have no fall camp intel coming yet. Obviously, that hasn't happened yet. Based on where we're at through the spring, what we've seen, what we saw in the spring game, and I left out Michael Caraway as well. That's obviously another option there for corner. What's your two deep at both sides of the field right now
So here,
today, based on what we've seen so far?
we didn't see that much on Caraway. And Caraway, for those of you who remember, transfer, right? So
Yep.
that is what it is. But based off of that, it's got to be Moore and Johnson, and
Yeah, I think
then
so too.
either Cormani and Foster or Caraway and Cormani, depending on how Caraway has progressed in this system. Because I think the hardest thing. So here's the thing about Caraway. He's a redshirt senior. He's got snaps. Okay,
Yep.
he's got scar tissue. He's been around a time or two, so he's seen a thing or two. So hopefully with that, he's going to be able to adapt to Big Papa Ron's system. However, we just don't have a lot of film on him, so I really can't make an assumption out of that. Outside of the fact of he's played a lot of ball, he's got a lot of snaps. But again, to what we mentioned earlier, the seniority doesn't always mean everything.
Yeah, I agree. And I like your take there. I think I'd like to see Dijon, assuming, of course, that this doesn't, boil into anything bigger. But I think I'd like to see Dijon and Devin and Caraway and Cormani. We'll do the D's and the C's, right? So mixing up first name and last name, of course. But yeah, I think that's your two deep. Don't rule out Ben Hanks, man. That kid can play. I would not be mad at all if he was on the two deep. I think likely he's third string right now, but man, if we suffer injuries at corner like we did last season, which God forbid, I don't want to see it, but if we do, I feel pretty good about the depth of that room this year. I feel better about the depth of that room than I did last year. We're not going to have to take a safety
100%.
and bring him over to corner like we did last year with Trequez, right? That's not going to happen. Which is great. That's really great to hear. We have some pretty deep talent in that room. I feel pretty good about it, so that's a good thing. All right, moving on. We have wide receiver next. Should we save that? Should we make that last? I feel like we kind of should. Let's make that last.
I am more of it. Okay, leaving it last and closing off with a bang. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's bang out some of these easier ones first. So right tackle. We mentioned most of the O-line is solid. We have returning starters. I think we're going to be fine there. I don't have concerns. In fact, I'm pretty optimistic about the four, right? In Barber, Najee, Harris, of course, Jake Slaughter, and Damian George. So those are your four starters that I think are locks. The question is right tackle. Now, we saw Bryce Lovett play on the first team in the spring game, and he looked pretty good out there. I also don't have a problem with Caden Jones potentially coming in, right? That's another potential guy who can play right tackle. He was actually listed as I think the second or third string in the Miami game last season. So Caden Jones would be fine as well. However, what I don't want to see is Cam Waits on the depth chart as anything above third string. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it at right tackle. So this is my concern. That's really all I got there. I'm pretty happy with Lovett. I think he's likely going to be the starter based on how things are projecting. I like that. I think he's solid. Still a younger kid. He's only a redshirt sophomore, or is he a true sophomore? Or a redshirt freshman. Might be a redshirt freshman, actually. I have to go back and look at the class. He's either I think he redshirted for sure. So I think he's either a redshirt freshman or a redshirt sophomore. But either way, still a little on the younger side. But he's getting there, and I think we're going to have some good stuff there. I like Westfall backing up Barber at left tackle. I'm not going to go full too deep on the O-line. I don't know that I even could. Roger Kearney could potentially see some playing time, though. I will throw that out there. He's looking better. And obviously one of the higher star recruits we've ever had. At O-line, which yet again, no Felix Ojo, unfortunately. He committed, he didn't commit, but it's looking like he's going to either Texas or Ohio State. I don't think we're going to get him, which is unfortunate. So, we just can't land a blue chip offensive lineman, man. We really can't do it, and it's frustrating. But neither here nor there. I like where the O-line's at. I think Lovett starting there with, again, maybe Caden Jones as a backup there.
Yep.
I'm good with that. What are your thoughts there? Anything to add?
I am okay if Cam sits the season out because I believe.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
All I'm saying is, okay, DJ raises the level of play, and I love what the team did. I love what Napier said as far as the campaign around. Okay, let's rally around this kid. Let's protect him as much as possible. This offensive line, I can't remember the last time we had an offensive line returning in multiple positions like this, in three positions, if not four. Well, four positions.
Four
okay.
Positions. Yeah.
This is stout. This is extremely stout, and that's a good thing. Jake Slaughter, he's going to do his thing. He's going to hold it down. He's going to be the glue. No problem there. But at the end of the day, I can't see in a world where Cam comes in, barring, a bug wiping out the O-line, because Caden Jones and Bryce Lovett have way better talent. I know the PFF, they've graded out higher. And not to mention, you can just see it in the footwork. They move so much better. It's
Yeah.
not even funny.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, Bryce, yeah, redshirt sophomore. He's got time.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, good. Okay, so that's good to hear. So I mean, Richard
Yes,
sophomore,
sir.
he's a third year player though, so he should be right in that spot where you want to start seeing him get on the field, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Nice, I like it. Yeah, I agree. I'm with you there. I'm fine with Cam sitting out the season too. Great story, great kid. Just I don't think you should be playing
Yeah.
tackle again. Maybe you back it. You want to back him up for George? I'm willing to look at that. I remember him playing some guard at the end of the 23 season, and he was fine. Like he was fine. There was no issue there. It was when we switched him to tackle last season that all the problems started. So let's put him back to guard if he needs to play. Right? Want to bring him into the two deep? I'm fine with that. I got no issue. Right? None. But let's put him at guard. Right? Let's do what makes sense. So all right, moving along. Tight end.
Especially as a redshirt senior. A
Yeah,
lot of
absolutely.
snaps.
Absolutely. Tight end. Give me your take on tight end. Where are you at? What do you want to see? What do you think we're going to see? Is it right?
Is it right? Great question. So here's the thing, right? At the end of the day, when you look at the tight end room, the tight end room has depth. Hayden Hansen, Tony Livingston, Amir Jackson, right? And then you bring in, as I call the Moneyball tight end, because Billy went and got him. You know, he's a 2-star kid, 3-star kid, but Cameron Costman, huge kid,
Yep.
6'5" and change, 240 tight end. Okay, not kind of looked over except for the military academies. I expect a lot of great things. Hayden, we've proven with him, okay, at 6'7" and some change, 272. He's got size. He can block. He's got a big radius. He's got hands. So that's phenomenal. Amir Jackson, redshirt freshman, coming back, 6'4" and some change, 6'5", 230. He can do a lot of different things. I love his
Love
athleticism, and he's got
and
great
loved how
hands.
he blocked in the spring game because Billy has shown if you don't block, you don't play. See Arliss
You don't play.
Boardingham. Yeah, see Arliss
Ding,
Boardingham if
ding,
you'd like
ding.
an example of that. So yeah, no, I loved what I saw at Amir in the spring game from a blocking
100%.
standpoint.
Exactly. And so if we can use that physical, if these guys, Hayden and Amir set the tone, the physical tone that we need to have, that like we know great Gator teams in the past have had, with the blocking schemes, they're going to set it. They're going to do it. And then coming off of that is going to be Tony Livingston. I don't see Caleb Rios getting a lot of playing time. Micah Jones. We'll see, depending on what happens with Cameron, with Costman, depending on how he develops. Because of his size, if he comes in and starts blocking and just plowing people over, I'm sure Billy's going to say, "All right, kid, give it a shot." But outside of that, for me all day long, it's Hayden, it's Amir.
As your starters, Hayden and Amir. Did I lose you? You there? All right, we might have lost audio from Randy's side for the moment, but I think Hayden and Amir. I don't know if Amir is going to start. Would be my take on that. Um, I think it's going to be Hayden and Livingston are going to be your starters. That's
I
my
think it's Livingston, so coming back there as well.
There we go. Got your audio back. That's good. Yeah, I think Hayden and Livingston are likely your starters, but I want to see Amir get snaps, man. From seeing his blocking in the spring game and how well he did that, I want to see him get snaps because obviously he's the best receiving threat we have on the team. So I definitely want to see him get snaps, and if
Bar
he can
none.
block better than Arliss, then he ought to get out there and get some blocking reps, and then also get some potential receptions, which would be a good thing, especially if we run the 12 personnel as much as we like to do. Whole other conversation that we're about to get to. So, last but not least, wide receiver. Let's talk about it. So this is probably the position group that we are most loaded at. This or running back. But realistically, when you look at it, the nice thing about wide receiver is you can play a lot of guys on the field at the same time if you run some 10 or 00 personnel. You can put 4 or 5 wide receivers out there. We don't ever do that, but we can. It's possible. And again, we're going to hold on to hope, or I'm going to hold on to hope from the comments of one Mr. Russ Callaway. and say that, okay, we might see some things besides just 11 or 12 personnel next year. Let's hope so. And let's hope he didn't mean 13 personnel, which is 3 tight ends and 1 running back, by the way. I don't think he did. I think he meant that we're going to see some 4 and 5 wide receiver formations. I don't know about 5, but maybe we'll get 4. And that's going to be really important because when we look at this, your obvious starters are going to be, well, I say obvious. You have 2 obvious starters. It's going to be Trey Wilson and Jamichael Sturdivant. Those are going to be your 1 and 2 for sure. Your number 3 is a little debatable, but I think it's going to be Aiden Mizell from everything we saw in the spring game and what was going on with him, though he was running with the second team at that time. I do think that he's going to be your starter there. Vernell Brown technically ran with the starters in the spring game. Be interested to see if he ends up starting. If he does, hey, I'm okay with that. I don't have objection because I think he's great. But the key thing is here: do we see Vernell? Do we see Dallas Wilson? Most importantly, probably based on that spring game performance, as getting significant snaps, even though they're freshmen. Here's that scenario that we were talking about earlier. Is this staff going to prioritize seniority at the receiver position? They kind of did it a little bit with K-Jack and Elijah Badger. We kind of already referred to it in the part that I talked about. Are they going to do that again, or are they going to let the talented freshmen that we have on this team see the field? And again, I'm not saying they have to start, but they better not be doing 5 snaps a game. Okay, this needs to be a Trey situation, right? Trey didn't start his freshman year, but he came on the field quite a bit. And by the time we got to the Tennessee game before he got hurt, he was getting massive amounts of targets, snap counts, everything else. And that continued throughout the year. That's what we need to see with these 2, really both of them, quite frankly. It's going to be hard to do that when you look at the depth and talent in this wide receiver room, unless you put the right personnel packages out there where you get these guys on the field because you are playing 4 or, God forbid, 5 wide receivers on a formation. And that's what I want to see. I want to see these guys get some snaps, get some time. I'm not calling for them to have to be starters. If your starters are Trey, Sturdivant, and Mizell, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. However, you better see some play time of significance for both Vernell Brown and especially Dallas Wilson, because he's on the standout list for top freshmen for ESPN, and there's a reason why. That kid can ball, and he better come out and get some snaps. I don't want to see a situation like we saw last year with Tank Hawkins. I'm not saying they're the same player. They're not, but I don't want to see 5 snaps a game or less. Not okay. Not going to have it. Will throw an absolute fit in visor throw during the season if these guys don't get snaps. That's my take on receiver, and it's also a take on play calling and play design, right? Because that's a part of this. So where are you at with this very talented wide receiver room?
Very talented is an understatement, B. Is an absolute
Yeah.
I cannot remember a wide receiver room looking like this in a long time. And I tell you what, the wide receiver room is what I like to refer to as first world problem room. It's just amazing. You know, when you look at, I am of the mindset that it is going to be Tricky Trey and J Mike starting. That's going to be fine. Aiden, we know Aiden's got speed. He has cardinal knowledge now as a redshirt sophomore, being in this offense, being in this scheme, or lack thereof. So it's one of those things where, you know, Aiden's twitchy, but Aiden is also extreme. I mean, Aiden's what, 6'2", 6'1", and some change, $172. So can he stay? Can the lower body stay healthy? Worried about that. We know Trey bulked up after hip surgery. He bulked up. He should be just fine. Vernell,
he's like 190 now, right?
Whom?
I think Trey's like 190 now, right?
Yeah, I want to say Trey is somewhere in the vicinity of 190 to 195. I mean, he just looks so dangerous.
And
you know,
he
on a
does.
mission, right?
He does. I wish we could have seen him in the spring game. I'm sorry we didn't. But yeah, going back to where you were going next, which is Jamichael. Sturdivant's what, 6'2.5", 6'3.5"? I don't remember which one, and like 205, 207.
Well, according to a couple of weeks ago, he's listed at 216.
Wow! So putting on some weight in the off season, that's awesome,
right? So It's possible. And so, Vernell, we'll see what happens with Vernell. Vernell's a little bit undersized, which is okay, right? At 5'11" and some change, a buck 75.
Yeah,
But
but you want to talk twitchy though. You want to talk twitchy.
extremely
Ooh.
twitchy, right? But if you want the what I would like to call the raw on Dallas Wilson, just go back to the spring game. Just go back to the spring game. This dude has to be on the field. I don't
Agreed.
care if it's, you know what, 00 personnel would be great. Something else, the Wilson and Wilson package would be great, right? All Wilson. I don't care, but this dude needs to see the field, period, Billy. Period.
Yeah.
Billy Napes, let's go. Mr. Callaway, let's go. Tank, we know he's got speed. We know that, right? Sitting at 5'10", 5'10 and a half, about 170, right? We know he's got speed, but again, as far as the route running and everything else, and then Khalil Kajak, we love him, like you said, we love him, but we'll see how he comes back from ACL. But if anything, he's a decoy in this scheme,
Yeah.
right?
Agreed. Yeah. Honestly, if he's on the third level, if he's back on the roster as a starter, I'm gonna break stuff. Like that can't happen. That cannot happen.
Big question mark there as a starter. Oh,
he cannot be a starter. I don't care. There's way too much talent in this room for him to be a starter. Period. End of conversation. I mean, you might as well make Spirito a starter at this point. I like Tyler.
Whoa.
I do. He's a good kid. He seems to getting transferred over from a preferred walk on to a scholarship player. I believe either this season or last season. Great kid, great story, all that stuff. Not a starter in this offense. Period. And frankly, not a second string guy anymore in this wide receiver room. There is way too much talent in there for him to be playing second string. And he did play it during the spring game, but that I think is because of some concerns with. And again, maybe Vernell was the starter because Trey didn't play. That's probably the case. Actually, now that I think about it, Vernell is probably your second to Trey in that slot position. And then you got your X and Y with Sturdivant, and again, maybe Mizell, maybe Wilson, kind of interchangeable there. Again, probably want to see Wilson. Again, no disrespect to Aiden, but Wilson's just, meaning Dallas Wilson, is just too good. He's just too good, and he's got to see the field. I love your point there. So, but again, if we put 4 and 5 wide receiver personnel sets out there, we don't have to worry about this as much.
Hey, how about that? What a concept.
What a concept. What a crazy idea in a modern college football offense to run 4 or 5 wideouts. Can it be done? Can it happen?
In other words,
can it occur?
All I'm saying is, North Dakota State, they run. I mean, maybe we need their offensive coordinator. Just saying.
I don't know, man. But yeah. So there's your thoughts on wide receiver. I think obviously probably one of the most contentious ones we're going to have. One of the ones we're going to have the most issue with. I think looking into this because I think we're likely not going to see some snaps for some guys that we need to see more snaps for. That we're going to see pop on film when they do play, and we're going to be like, why isn't he out there either starting or getting significant rotation? I think this staff has not done well there. They've recruited extensively well, but they haven't done a great job of putting the best players on the field when they should, and that's something we hope gets cleaned up this season. Maybe Russ having more of an influence with his air raid background helps that. We will see. Fingers crossed. All we can do is hope right now, but I'm not super optimistic that we get what we want there, at least right now. Time will tell. We will find out, but that's got concerns for me for sure. So I think that probably pretty much wraps it up. Any other thoughts before we close out here?
No, I think the only thing I'm going to say is a really good conversation on this. It's really tough when you're trying to analyze players and positions and everything. And I think we might have said it before, but I cannot reiterate and iterate enough. On paper, this roster screams. And can we put them in the right places, in the right positions, in the right scheme to succeed and do everything that they are capable of? That is I think out of everything this fall, that's probably the biggest pressure that this coaching staff is going to have. Just saying.
Yeah, no, I think that's the question. I think that's the question coming out here. What do we do? What do we do to maximize the talent on the field, right? We've talked about this time and time and time again and how Napier has not done this. What do we do to do a better job of that this season? Because now the talent is so thick at multiple different positions. We have got to do a great job of maximizing that, whether that's getting snaps to the right guys, whether that's prioritizing the right guys to start versus to not, right? All of those things really do play a part in what we're looking at here, and I think it's something where we have got to make the right decisions there. At least the majority of these situations that we've gone into and talked about with these different position groups, I think that's going to be absolutely crucial for having a successful season. This is still a very difficult schedule. In some ways, it might be more difficult than last year. We'll talk about that in another pod upcoming. But ultimately, there are some tough games we are going to play here, and we have got to find a way to maximize what we're putting on the field to give ourselves the best chance to win. And if we don't do that, then we are still in the same boat we've been in, and I will still stick to my guns that Napier is not the answer here, despite a lot of the things he does well. There are certain things he does very wrong, and that is just debilitating. So hopefully that does not continue to be the case. Again, I am holding out hope with Callaway's promotion that we get some stuff on the offensive side of the ball particularly. I am hoping on the defensive side that we make the right positional calls there from some of the ones that we talked about. I think the defensive side is a little more sewn up than the offensive side is, but time will tell and we will see. From here, we can't do anything but hope for the best, right? Last year was hope for the best, plan for the worst. I'm just going to hold on this season for hope for the best. I'm going to hold it right there. I'm not going to plan for the worst yet. We may get there, but for now, it's hope for the best. That's. I'm just going to stop right there, and we'll leave it at that.
Fair
So, with that, our next pod will be coming to you in 2 weeks. We are going to do our Gator Player Spotlights for 2025. We did this last year for 2024. We're going to do it again for this season. So we'll be bringing you that on May 27th. So that will be our next recording. And with that, I will turn it over to you to close it out and sign us off.
Solid, man. Great convo. Enjoyed going through these positions, taking a look at these, the flashbacks, right, from years past, what happened, who came on the field, and then the unique situations we have coming up this fall. So enjoyed it. And with that
Absolutely.
being said, wherever you are and whenever you may be listening, thank you for taking the time, and we will see you around Gator Nation.